I'm going to move forward and do whatever it is that I need to do. And I remember getting off of that call and sobbing because that represented so much growth. To not need that, so freeing.
I'm Amy Woodall, and this is The Conscious Habit, a show from the People Forward Network. We're teaching you how to incorporate love and consciousness at work, at home, and the world at large. You just heard from Ify Walker. She's the founder of Offor. They're a company that's dedicated to reshaping leadership and organizational culture through recruitment. And she's coined this term called the Work Twisties. It is her own personal experience of having profound loss and losing her way, losing her direction, her purpose, feeling really unsafe in the space that she was holding in her career. And I think what's interesting about this conversation is this didn't create a new career path for her. It wasn't like she lost her way and then realized she needed to leave and start something new. This happened in the midst of her own company. And it taught her, incredible just lessons on resilience and personal agency, how to go through grief, what it means to learn how to truly trust yourself and your team when things are uncertain. She is so open and vulnerable in this conversation. Lots of incredible takeaways, whether you have found yourself in this space or not, or maybe know someone who has. Inevitably, we are going to experience some type of profound loss in our lives, whether it is of the things that we love or the people that we love. And there's a lot of great wisdom that Ify shares about how we can navigate that. Take a listen. Hey, Conscious Habit listeners. I am really excited for our conversation today. It is a concept that I think we've danced around but have never talked about it in the way that our guest, Ify Walker, brings to us. Ify is the founder of Offor, and she and her team have done executive search and helped organizations really figure out how to find the right people, the right talent, to amplify the visions that they have for their organization. But she's been through some stuff herself, as we all have. She has had a journey, and part of that journey was experiencing something that she dubs as the Work Twisties. And so I'm really excited to learn from you, Ify, to hear your experience. I'm sure myself and many of our listeners are going to be leaning in saying, I think I've had that. I just didn't know what to call it. So welcome to the Conscious Habit podcast.
Thank you, Amy. It's a delight to be here.
So can you just start off with telling us what are the Work Twisties?
Yeah. The Work Twisties are a moment in time or a period in a person's career and life where they find themselves at a loss in terms of, purpose, place, sort of positioning and sense of certainty. And I did call it the Work Twisties after, what I think most of us sort of saw on the world stage when Simone Biles needed to step away. And when we sort of dug into the research around what the twisties were, essentially it's this moment where a lot of athletes will lose a sense of their positioning, whether they're diving, they're a gymnast, the skills that used to be very certain, their ability to sort of know where their feet were going to land or where they were going to end in the pool is completely distorted. And it's really dangerous, right? Because as you can imagine, these people are doing extremely dangerous things where certainty is required and a sense of position, your place, who you are is necessary to be able to do those things and to thrive in your career. And that's what I experienced several years ago, and I know we're going to go into it, but essentially it is this unmooring, right? A sense that the ground has fundamentally shifted and the tools, the skills that you might have used in prior situations to sort of get yourself regrounded don't work, right? And it's terrifying. It's really isolating. And I don't think we talk about it enough at work. We like to talk about work as though success is sort of up and over to the right? That it's always going to be this direct line for progress. And for so many leaders, that is often what it's been. And when it doesn't look like that, that can be extremely devastating.
Is burnout like a part of the path of experiencing the work twisties? Do you see that as something totally different? Because I do think that people unfairly associate burnout as an external experience, meaning like they think it's just the to-do list and the demands, but really I think burnout is a byproduct of abandoning an inner knowing. That's like what we really mean is no, but we say yes because we think we have to, or to get ahead, or whatever the case might be. And so I think burnout is kind of this ripple effect, a lagging indicator of abandoning an inner knowing. And so how do you correlate the two of those, the work twisties and burnout?
Yeah. I love that I love that definition because first of all, it just rings so true, right? I think a lot of us have experienced burnout, and I like to tell folks that you're not using exactly the same words, but that burnout is oftentimes you said no to yourself, right? Like you know a thing to be true, but you're no longer living in your zone of genius. You're no longer doing the things that you know are going to give you energy, and like that's what's actually draining, right? Like that's what's so depleting. Where what I have seen through the work twisties is that there isn't an abandonment of knowing, there is a lack of knowing. There isn't a knowing. And it is probably akin to, I've never sort of walked blindly in the wilderness, but it is a sense of having no direction. It's one thing to say, like, I know this thing about myself and I've made all these choices over time that have led me to a place where now I am completely burnt out and I'm deeply unfulfilled. But you can look back and see the gap, right? Like this is but this is I used to know. In fact, knowing is a part of my identity, right? I know how to stick my landing, right? I know if I fall, I know how to get back up. I know where to go. I know what the next move is. This is a complete lack of knowing. And in the work context, what I've seen it manifest as, or what it did for me, was that there was just a lack of belief. I did not know what I believed. And the way that it became so dangerous was that it also enabled or created a space where I just abdicated because I didn't know, then anybody could sort of fill in, right? What should my company do? I actually have no idea. I don't know what I believe. What do you believe? I don't actually know. So a leader could come in and say, well, this is what I believe. Okay, well, that sounds fine. Thank God somebody knows where to go. And for me, this sort of thing or the incident or the moment that really kind of cracked this open for me was a loss of my dad, right? So my dad was my number one supporter. My dad was, I think that every person in their life should have somebody who loves them to an unreasonable degree. And that was my dad. He loved me in at an unreasonable degree, right? And so there was nothing that he thought I could not do, that I could not be. I mean, there was just nothing. And so, and I, like a lot of kids, sort of took that for granted. And so when that wasn't there, there was a recognition over time that like the baton had passed, right? Like a generational baton had passed, that protection, that sense of, a light essentially was gone. Now, what am I without that, right? So that is a fundamental sort of shifting, and it sort of created this opening in the work context, and I didn't know how to deal with it, right? And so that sort of became the journey of really having to rebuild myself back up and sort of like teach myself how to like get on the balance beam again. And so I'm happy to talk about that, but that's sort of the difference that I see.
Yeah. In your experience of losing your dad, who just had been like this rock and this steadiness, I'm sure, for you, the safety net for you for your whole life, was it an abrupt, like instantly you could sense that you're like, my guiding post, my compass is broken. I don't know what's next. Or was it a gradual where all of a sudden you kind of were like, holy cow, where I'm lost here and I don't know how I got here. What was that experience for you?
Yeah, I love that question. It was more gradual because I think, in the beginning, sort of, your instincts kick in, right? It's sort of like, okay, there's a bunch of things that like have to be done. And so you sort of do those things, you march through those things, but it was a gradual, at least for me, there were certain stumbles I was making, right? That just didn't make sense. Like, this is not a stumble I would make, right? I wouldn't not know how to answer this very basic question about like what my company does. Like, I wouldn't not know how to answer like what I think our compensation philosophy would be. I wouldn't not know whether this was the person who I should hire and if they align with our company values or not. These were things that were just very basic and very known to me, right? I know what my company stands for. I know what I believe. I know what we're trying to do in the world. I know who belongs here on this team. I know who doesn't. And to recognize, in a moment, but then also get the feedback that there was all this chaos that was ensuing around me because of it, because I had just completely essentially like lost the plot. Right. Like lost the plot. And it's one of those things where because there's not language for it, I don't think we're able to recognize what's happening in ourselves, but also like recognize it in other people, right? To say like, this is a moment, like you were lost, but like given all that's happening, like this is normal, like everything is as it should be. Like you will come back to yourself. But when you're in it and you don't know that, it's pretty devastating.
I'm sure in the moment it felt like the only reality you could sense happening ahead of you. By the way, when you mentioned you're like, my dad loved me like bigger and better. I swear I felt the sense it said, and I still do. Like,
And
and
I
I,
think
I
that's,
I felt that sense immediate, like, and yes, and I do.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Did you have to take time away? Did you just need to be okay being lost for a little bit? What was your navigation beyond that point for you?
Yeah. So that is one of the things I like to talk about in terms of how can we support people through this? I think for most high performers, the idea of taking time away doesn't even cross their minds, right? Like you're probably like this, you're probably surrounded by people like this who take a lot of pride in their ability to, you know, I'm gonna win every race, but I don't quit, right? I don't finish, right? I'm not gonna have like a do not finish on my record book. And so, the sort of historical model around quote unquote bereavement in the US is sort of like maybe your company gives you a week, maybe they give you 2 weeks, right? Funerals are a day, right? The culture that I come from, daughters literally like you shave your head for like a year. It is known to everyone that you were in a moment.
It's visible, like it's made visible rather than we're walking around in our society. It's like I'm walking around and my life is shaken, but no one knows. Their lives are moving on and mine is standing still.
That's right. It's a very visible thing and it normalizes it, right? It normalizes that your life has shifted, that it's normal for your life to have shifted, that you're going to need to take time away to relearn your steps, figure out who you are in this new reality, to relearn yourself. It's just normal. It's a part of life. It's a part of the cycle. And because it's so talked about and it's normalized, you're seen, you're supported, all of those things are normal. And that's not what happens here, right? So I took 2 weeks at the end, this is during the pandemic, to, like go to Nigeria and bury my dad, right, with my family. But I came back with like, all right, time to go. Right. Where looking back on it, I think about the Simone Biles sort of analogy. She did what I think was one of the most, I don't know, like heroic acts, I think. She did not ask for permission to save her own life. She said, I'm done. This is not safe for me. That's it, regardless of what. And she's doing this on a national stage. There's no stage for me. She's doing this on a national stage where people are telling her she's a coward, that she's a cop out, that she has like disgraced America because she's, not willing to potentially break her neck when she's going through these things. And I didn't do that. I did not take away time. I did not, she didn't ask for permission. I did. And it almost cost me. And so what I would, say to people who, and I know it's we can think about like it's a luxury, to even be able to do that, to have the resources to be able to do that. But the fact of the matter is a lot of people who are listening to your podcast, they do have that, right? It's a story we tell ourselves that we can't, right? But I absolutely could have, but I didn't. I didn't know I could. I was waiting for someone else to tell me I could. And I think that time with self to figure out what I wanted, to figure out who I was, what kind of leader I was going to be in this new reality, the things that were really important to me, what mattered most, would have been one of the healthiest things that I could have done. But I said I like kind of lived that out through my company, and it was not pretty. It was not pretty. So
What was the breaking point? Was there somebody in your life that was like, something has to give? Was it you? Sometimes we have to get sick of our own like madness,
that
Was it you? Or what was the breaking point for you that helped make a shift?
Yeah, the breaking point for me was a couple of things. So I recognized, did you play sports like growing up? Are you an athlete? Did you play sports?
Yes, here's what I will tell you is that I am a very competitive person by nature. I lovingly say I put the petty in competitive. It doesn't mean I'm good at everything, but in my head, I sure think I am.
Right. I love it. I love that energy. I love it. I love it. And so I played sports too. And so I think about, just understanding that, the athletes that I know in my life, people who played sports, they understand that you need a coach, right? Like you don't, if you want to be great at something, you don't do that. You don't walk that journey by yourself. And so I knew immediately like, hey, there are just a bunch of things that I'm gonna need to put in place. So I got an executive coach, actually got two. I got a therapist. I was like, I don't know what this is gonna be, but I know that I'm gonna need some help. And so through that, I mean, it was pretty brutal, the feedback that I was getting from my team. So like, what were some of the things that were happening? There was a gap between what my company said it was and the values we're living and like how we were actually operating. I was operating at like an insane pace, right? Like an insane pace, like a pace of a founder, but like,
Was this like with both of those, like the operating separate from values and the pace, was that true prior to the loss and you just didn't recognize it? Or had that taken a turn in the loss and it exposed it there?
I think it was there. It was there, but it just like was ratcheted up, and it was like a drive without purpose, right? That being the difference. Like before there was like a purpose, a North Star, this was just like an incessant, do more. Everything's got to be just like, and there was no guiding light. There was no start. There was no break. There was no like, hey, pump the brakes. There was no, the gas tank is empty. We didn't make stops for fuel. We did like, it was just a relentless pace and nothing was ever good enough, which was a part of me before. But this was like brutal, like, because I just didn't like, I didn't have that container wasn't there. So I was mean. You know what I'm saying? Like you can say, this isn't the standard, we need to, this is like feedback. Here's what you need to do. What you don't need to say is like, nobody I know would ever put something like this in front of me. It's like unnecessary. Do you know what I mean?
You know that like hurt people. It is like, yeah, when we are in a rough state, then it's very difficult to give to others what we don't have for ourselves. It's a clear indicator, right, of what we're missing.
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. And by my ability to sort of like, and then the feedback I got, like, did 360 and it was just like, nothing's ever good enough. People are basically like terrified of you. It was just bad. And then that confrontation with how I saw myself and how I was actually performing, so to speak, was like devastating, right? Like that's also like the self, like the death of ego, right? It's like you are not well. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And then someone on the team said, we were talking about like a bereavement policy, and it was like the most brilliant moment. And I said, well, we should leave it up to people to decide how much time they need. And she said, no, no, I don't think we at least have to put down a minimum. She's like, just because sometimes you just have to take the keys. Sometimes, and that was like her soft way of saying you decided when you thought you were ready and you weren't. It would have been great to have the ability to take away the keys, right? And so that was sort of the moment. Yeah.
Ladies, imagine taking time away to work on you. Meditation, yoga, transformational work, a chance to have grand adventures and build lasting relationships. Desiree Garcia and I founded High Vibe Tribe Retreats to create just that. And if you're curious about joining us on our next retreat, head over to highvibetriberetreat.com, link in the show notes. How great for her to share that with your team. And what a these moments, I'm sure this is, I mean, I don't want to take from what your lessons are, but man, like the things that suck the most in life, and they're terrible, and we wouldn't wish them on anybody, but they really bring us, like they crack us open in a way that takes us to the next place of compassion or understanding or growth with the team. And, there's so many layers of good that can come from the suck, or we hope that we allow that in. And how brave of her to share that, but also to know, like, human nature. How many companies do you know that have unlimited PTO policies and nobody uses it because they're afraid of the judgment of like, oh, but they're going to think I'm not dedicated if I take an extra week, So I love that your team felt safe enough with you to challenge that.
It was a big moment. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because I remember then when we had someone on the team who had a really sick relative that they needed to care for, I remember that moment. And I was like, sometimes you got to take away the keys, right? And that's what we did. We took away the keys. You're going to be fully paid. Like, don't worry about it. But I don't know that I would have been able to do that or even had the presence of mind to understand that sometimes we can't. Like, I thought what Simone did was so just incredible. Like, her ability to just be like, I'm not doing that. I don't know that in her shoes, I think we've seen plenty of examples of athletes injured, being applauded, even though their career is going to be over. They've won in the shorthand, but they've lost in the long game, right? Because they've sort of persevered through these sorts of injuries. But I think that the ability to recognize the signs in others, I would not have had the ability to do that had I not been through my own experience as well.
Looking back now, what are the pieces that you're like, here's where it really grew me. Here's what really grew my team or the organization. What are those glimmers that came from the rough?
Yeah. I mean, one of them is that during the 2 weeks that I was away, when I went to Nigeria to bury my dad, I essentially told the team, like, I just need to be able to go away, and you all are in charge, and there's nothing that you will do that will wreck the company. I will support every single decision that you have made. And they were nervous, and my top person was very, very nervous about it. And because I'd never done that before, right? I'd never sort of stepped back in any meaningful way. And this is only 2 weeks. We're not talking about a lifetime. It's 2 weeks. It's like 2 weeks. And then, but that was a big deal. And when I came back and we did a reflection on like the previous year and what had been the most meaningful, my, top leader said, the 2 weeks that you were away were the best 2 weeks. Right? And when I asked why, she said, because knowing that I had your full trust and knowing that no matter what I did, you would have my back freed me up to make decisions and make choices for the company. And they did brilliant things, right? There was like an opportunity to be in this really big magazine, and they're like, she said, do whatever. So they like wrote up the write up, put it in my pic. They did, it was 10 times better than anything I would have done on my own. And it was so humbling, right? For me to just say like, how much potential is being kept because feel like I'm the only one who can do all the things, like the arrogance, right? The hubris in that, right? I think that was honestly like one of the biggest moments. And then I think the second one is that there's a colleague who's been with me for a really long time, and we both experienced loss, at different points. But I think the way that the work twisties for her, the work twisties for me, like having gone through that process is like this sense of like when you have done a hard thing, like the confidence that comes from doing a really hard thing, right? Like, you know what that's like. Like when you have done a hard thing, you kind of move with like a different sense of what's important, right? One of the things that stands out to me the most is, there was a period in my career where I was always seeking these like basically like signs of external validation, right? Like did I get into this prestigious fellowship? Did I get this particular award that's like known in my industry? And I would chase those things. And I remember that after this period, there was this one organization that I've been trying to get into. And, I was just like, look, they were interviewing me. And I was like, look, they're like, why do you want this? And I'm like, honestly, like I have this vision for the future that I want. And like, if this is a part of it, great. But if it isn't, it's not. It's not. That's fine. That's fine too. There would have been a time where I would have been so concerned that made me sound really arrogant or whatever. But it was my truth at that moment that like, before I felt like I needed this, like I didn't need this. I'm going to move forward and do whatever it is that I need to do. And I remember getting off of that call and sobbing because that represented so much growth. To not need that, so freeing.
It's like Marie Forleo, her phrase is like, it's figure out ability. And I think that like when you do something that is challenging, than like in my earlier life, like we went through incredible financial hardships in '08 when the economy went down and we like fought tooth and nail to try and keep our house. And like it was a really incredibly challenging time. And now I can kind of be like, we've been broke before. We'll figure it out.
That's
It's
right.
a
Yes,
it's
yes.
a it's a confidence and figure out ability that I think comes with that. What practices did you learn? I mean, were there things that you leaned on? Because I mean, this is to me an experience. It's an experience of the mind, it's an experience of the soul. Like it encompasses so many aspects of ourself. So was it prayer? Was it moving your body? What kind of what did you rely on? And my gut says there's was some being practices that you integrated. Because you were already pretty damn good at the doing. The being part, I would imagine.
Yeah. You know what's interesting is like, so one of the things is I talked to my dad. That's one. Um, the other one is that I talked to myself, right? Like I don't know that I really was in conversation with myself. And those conversations led to really big shifts, right? Like we picked up our entire life from New Orleans and we moved to a farm in the middle of nowhere. Like these were things like there were really tough conversations with my husband about like what I wanted, right? And what I was no longer, willing to accept from like a geographical perspective. Like, and sort of that was like sort of a moment of like, I am not asking for permission, right? And so that sort of practice of, obviously there are places of compromise, but also recognize the places where I was no longer willing to ask for permission to do the things that I knew, right? And that's how I knew I was back, right? Because that sense of knowing was back, right? Now, We can talk about whether we're always doing the things that we know, but before there was an absence of knowing. I had no ability to know, but now this conversation with myself, this dialogue with my dad, this, I was in therapy, right? This ability to forgive myself for honestly the things that had happened during the work twisties, right? There was so much guilt around all the stumbles, all the mistakes, the kind of the way I showed up, and being able to just say like to talk to myself as though I loved myself, right? The way you would talk to someone you love. That was a practice that I put in place, and I still do that. I'll still talk to myself and I'll refer to myself as like even thinking about like little Ify, sometimes I'll just be like, it's okay. I know why you had to do this. And thank you. Thank you. Right. Like you got me through that. Right. So I'm not here to judge you. That's like I think that's those are the things that have been like the biggest. Of course, there were things like I take walks and, making time for the things that really bring me joy. But I think the conversation with my dad, the conversation with myself, the ability to talk to myself as though I was someone I loved, those are honestly the things that I think have been the most transformational for
Yeah.
me.
It's so good to be able to self-parent and self-coach. And, it's really our own acceptance we're always searching for. And I think that reflection, when you were in that conversation of saying, like, if it's a yes, great. If it's a no, that's okay too, is such a reflection of like a good relationship with us. Because when we don't have it, we do seek that validation falsely, externally. And then we're never sure of it because it's not really ours, right? So we constantly question whether we got it, and we have, what's the phrase everybody is using now where it's like, oh, imposter syndrome. And that's just an indication that we're looking for somebody outside of us to say, you deserve this, you earned it, you're good enough. So how great that you're doing it for you. And pretty cool because, I mean, you're stuck with you for your whole life, every second. Can't escape it.
Wherever I am, there I am.
That's right. Yeah, you're the only constant in your
That's
life.
right.
So pretty cool that you're learning how to like that, like yourself and like the space. For people listening who may be experiencing this, and you and I had an offline conversation of things are changing quickly for many people, and there is uncertainty. And for you, your organization works. I mean, I know you have some various government contracts. There are things that have changed within that. And my gut says this work twisties can be initiated by like extreme or fast change. So if people find themselves in this space of uncertainty, of maybe even feeling a little helpless because there's changes happening that they have no say in, how do you recommend, or what do you recommend they do for themselves?
Well, I would never tell someone what to do for themselves, but I can say with the things that worked for me, right? And one of the things that worked for me was going back to like the last time when I felt secure and thinking about those things and basically trying to reteach myself with very, 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 very small wins, right? So what do I mean by that? So for example, like I remember when I was in college, my first year of college, I almost flunked out. That was devastating for me as a kid who had been like top performer, all these things. I was like, I can't be this person. Like, who am I then if I'm not these like straight A's? And I remember telling myself, okay, and I still don't know where I got the wherewithal to think that this was the path, but it's probably from sports. I said, okay, you are going to take one summer class. That's all you're going to do. You're going to sit in the front row. You're going to take notes every day. You're going to talk to the professor every single day. You're going to go to every single set of office hours. And essentially, you're going to prove to yourself that you are the kind of person who gets A's. Like you are going to go back to the fundamentals, right? We're not talking about a full course load. And it's like, I don't remember what the class was. It was probably like a nothing burger, didn't mean anything. But the point was to teach myself, to remind myself through action, not by thinking my way there, but by acting my way back to who I knew myself to be. right? And then once I had done that, then I could build. And similarly, that's essentially what I did when I was facing the work twisties, was to go back to the basics, right? Like, I'm going to get up today and I'm going to make sure that every day sun hits my face. Okay, now I'm going to get up today, sun's going to hit my face, and I'm going to, it sounds ridiculous, I'm going to make sure that the first thing my kids see from me is a smile, not like mom, like in her head, right? Like, just like learning how to crawl again. And it is humbling, but the small building blocks, okay, I did that. I was true to myself. I said I was going to do a thing and I did a thing. Okay, I know that now. Okay, I did this thing. I said I was going to do it and then I did this thing. And then repeatedly doing those things with in very small ways through work. Okay, I said I was going to send this email to the team on a Monday and I did it at 9 o'clock and I did it. Okay, the next week, same thing. And just rebuilding step by step, sort of those fundamental pillars. Those things were transformational for me in times where nothing else felt certain. I couldn't figure out this thing, but just like the concreteness of an action I said I was going to do and then doing that and counting that as a win, that was transformational for me.
I love that. It's like if you find yourself where someone has you questioning something, someone, some experience has you questioning what you're made of or what you're capable of, to just honor that being within you in those small steps and keep your promises to yourself. That's what I think is really important in your experience for people to remember, is like, it doesn't have to be all things all at once. Baby steps, and just keep your promise to yourself. What's cool about that is it's actually breaking down the self-fulfilling prophecy wheel. Like, our beliefs influence our judgments. Judgments motivate actions. Actions create results. Results either reconfirm or rewire the belief. So if we find ourselves where we're not believing in ourselves, so the belief is hardwired, then the automatic judgment we're going to have about ourselves is, I can't do that, or I don't have time, or, whatever. And so if we can recognize the belief, bypass the judgment, and take an action associated with what we'd rather have, our beliefs will be rewired by the experience. And that's exactly what you did, which is really cool. Yeah, instead of being, I wish I could. It's very easy for us to live in our head. And honestly, we suffer far more in our minds than we do in our lives. And I think,
Oh yeah, so much of my suffering was it was all here, right? It was all here, but when you're in it, there were moments like I'd literally be on vacation and I would be just like sobbing, right? Like, I am the biggest failure. I'm never gonna do this. The company, it was all here, right? But the daily sort of just marching through, and anybody who's been in sports, right? You know the drills. Your coaches like having you do, doing like how many burpees, how many this, back and forth. I know it's a terrible term, but at least when I played basketball, I used to call them like, suicides, which I don't think people use anymore, but that's what they called them when I was a kid. And, doing those drills back and forth, and like your coach is not letting you think your way into, there's a place for the visualization, like doing those exercises before the game and you're picturing yourself making certain shots or, passing certain people. I ran cross country and there's a place for that. But so much of it was just like the day in and day out. Like, by the time you get to race day, this race has nothing on me because I've run longer than this race. I've put in so many hours up until this point. Like, this is a thing I can do. That's what I had to basically go back. It was like, what's my training plan? And then just try to work through it.
yeah, everybody hates practice, but it's what wins the games, right?
Yeah.
So, and it is building muscle memory. Our subconscious mind, which, as we talk about on the podcast a ton, 95% of our life, our subconscious and unconscious mind are running the show. It really exists in the body. This is why our body, like our subconscious is hardwired muscle memory, why we can drive ourselves home from somewhere and have no recollection of driving. And it's because like the conscious mind didn't need to be involved. We've got this down pat, right? And so building that muscle memory back up. And I coach executives through this all the time. When they're in their head and they believe they can't do something or they believe they're stuck, to go back to find the evidence that can prove it wrong, whether that evidence was from 10 years ago or 5 minutes ago. Like, find the evidence, because that's the proof that you need to move forward and take that action. So I love this advice that you're sharing and the insight. And I think it's just empowering. We're going to find ourselves in difficult positions. That is what's guaranteed in life, whether that is coming down from, someone else making decisions for us, whether it's loss, whether, it's financial hardships. We will find ourselves at some point in time with our back against the wall. And thank you for sharing with us your journey of how you moved beyond that. And before we wrap up, I'd love to hear, I love to ask every guest. Sometimes I forget, okay, because I'm human and I do forget this, but I love to ask every guest, when, on the moments that I remember, what their definition of consciousness is. And man, like you really had a conscious journey that you went through in moving through this. So what is that definition for you?
For me, it's this ability to almost stand outside of yourself, right? And kind of watch the scene and understand that you have an ability to choose your response, right? And the moments when I have felt the most conscious is when I can do that, like when I can sort of see the movie, right? And say, this is what I'm going to choose to do. Like just being able to choose that response versus feeling like things are happening to me. That's how I think about it. And, thank goodness for your podcast, especially in this like moment that we're in as a country, right? There's a lot of things that are coming at all of us. There are executive orders, there are, all kinds of rules that are being shifted, norms, right, around how we engage with our democracy that are shifting right in front of us. And it's really, I think, easy to kind of react, but in those moments where I'm able to step aside and say, okay, what am I choosing? Like, what am I choosing to believe that I can do? What am I choosing to believe about my company? What am I choosing to believe about my family? What am I choosing to believe? And then what am I choosing to do? Those are the moments where I feel most sort of alive, right? Like it just like feeling like I'm really at power and at ease. And I think that's different from being like delusional, right? Right. I don't, it's not, am I like, I'm clear about what is happening, right? But also like trying to get just as clear about the choices I have in front of me as well.
It's such a great question to ask, like just to recognize, and to your point, being the seer that sees, the watcher that watches, and then being able to make informed and aligned decisions. It's really hard to solve problems from the same energy that created them.
Ooh,
So I
yeah.
think that's in this space too, for us to sort of be like, what is the energy? And then what is the opposite of that will be needed in order to find, and create a solution, whether it's purely for ourselves or whether it's for a collective. I love that definition of consciousness. Is so good. So good.
And that's why I love your podcast, because I think you're bringing, and what you do more broadly, right? You're more than just your podcast, is like you're bringing people who believe a certain set of things, right? Together. And there's a community in that. And I think fundamentally in this moment in time, more than ever, probably in sort of recent history, at least in my sort of lifetime, we need that, right? We need those constant reminders that we have other people who believe what we believe and believe in a certain set of things and believe that we can actually make those things so. Because without that reminder, I think it'd be really easy to believe that we don't actually have any agency, that we don't have the power to change certain things, that we're not in community, that we have to be fragmented. So I'm just really grateful, right? And I've made a commitment in this new era, sort of this world regime that we're in, is to say that, to express that to people, to not withhold that, right? Because I don't know, I just think our world is really shifting, and I think we need to know that that there are more of us out here than I think maybe a broader world would like us to believe.
Yes, amen. And thank you for sharing your story, for being vulnerable, for taking what was a really difficult time and using it as a way to help other people who undoubtedly will go through these things, and for being a ripple effect of good. I think when we're doing the work and we are being conscious, it's such an offering to the world, and there's a ripple effect of good just from that vibration of love that we're sharing. So thank you for sharing your wisdom and your experience. I'm really grateful. And I know our listeners are too.
Thank you, Amy.
Before we wrap up this episode, here are my 3 takeaways. Number 1, sometimes losing your way is part of the process. It's hard to be found if you've never been lost, right? So whether it's burnout, it's personal loss, recognizing that you're lost is the first step to finding your way back. And there's times that we can be gleefully lost. If you find yourself in the in-between, maybe you are in between decisions, the next big move, etc. I think just reminding yourself that this is part of the process. There's nothing wrong with you. You aren't, terrible. You aren't necessarily stuck. That this is part of the path to discovery. Number 2, self-talk and self-coaching can be underrated superpowers. How are you speaking to yourself? Just knowing that, being aware of that the voice in the head, is it positive and encouraging? Is it negative and downplaying? If we can dwell on all that could go wrong, why can't we dwell on everything that can go right? Paying attention and being in charge of that voice within can be the difference of the spiral we go down. Not to say that that won't have its own benefits for us potentially, but it could be the difference between the suffering we experience in our minds versus the suffering we experience in our lives. We often suffer so much more in our minds because of the story we're believing is true about us. And number 3, trust. Do you trust yourself? Do you trust yourself to figure out the hard things? And if your answer is no, or if you're not sure, I encourage you to look back on the overwhelming evidence you have in your life that you have the capability of figuring out tough things and navigating your way through tough things because you have done it before, somehow, somewhere. And do you trust other people? Do you allow other people to help you when things are challenging? Or do we feel as though we've got to be the one that carries the weight of the world? That trust we have for ourselves and others can be the difference in how long we stay challenged, how long those twisties are with us, and how quickly we can feel loved and supported along the way. If this episode resonated with you, maybe consider sending it to a friend or a colleague or someone you know might need this today. And as always, if you're loving these conversations, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and connect with me on LinkedIn. I would love to hear your thoughts. And make sure you connect with Ify and her team and all the great work they're doing as well. Thanks for listening to the Conscious Habit Podcast. If you dug this episode, we'd love it if you would subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And if you're into this consciousness thing, if you like this conversation and you want to meet more like-minded people, head on over to Facebook and join the Conscious Habit community. Until next time, do the world a favor and go love yourself.